All right, so welcome to Project and Portfolio 2. Congrats on getting it this far into the program. I know if you've been an online student, it's been about a year since you've started school and you've gone through a lot of those fundamental courses, understanding what a game designer does. You went through programming foundations, getting an understanding of basics of scripting, and really starting to now get into the core of being a game designer and actually starting to work on some of your own projects. So I know you worked on some of your own projects in PNP1. This is another opportunity for you guys to build a portfolio piece and show off what it is you can do inside Unity. So this project, this midterm project that you're about to embark on is simulating what it's like to work as a level designer in the industry. So we are making this game Scraps. We've been developing this game, and now we're hiring you guys as the level designers to create levels for our game specifically. So what I like to do before I jump into this class specifically and going over all the details about it, I like to just talk about the project as a whole. So you see the big picture and you see what your end goal is, rather than just doing assignments one at a time. You get a better picture of the step-by-step process. So first up is this course, Project and Portfolio 2. This is where you're going to create your map and actually create the design of the level. So here we're going to be focusing on the gameplay and focusing on the interaction, what it is the player's actually doing in the level, right? The fun element and actually designing the interactions. Then we're also going to be getting some practice with the tools. So not only do you have to design a level, you have to prove that you're actually able and ready to build the level in Unity. So we're going to get you guys warmed up and get you a lot of practice with Perforce. You're going to be using Unity this month and going through some of the tools and really preparing you to be successful in the next course, which is level design. So in level design, you take your map that you've created in Project and Portfolio 2 and you update it, make some changes to it, and then you implement that into level design. So you're going to bring that in and think of that as your blueprint. That's your guide to actually build the level in 3D space. So if anybody's ever purchased a Prima strategy guide, that's really what we're going for with the map. It should give you all the detail, not only to build the architecture, but also give you an idea of what gameplay interactions happen at certain parts in the level. So during the level design month, you'll be actually building and constructing the level as well as getting it functioning and working. So if you ever participated in, say, like a closed alpha, an early access part to a game or to a build, that's similar to what you'll have in level design. So it's not going to look pretty, it's not going to be finished, but it's going to be fully playable. You should be able to sit a player down and play through your level, and they can complete it, and they should be able to understand what they're doing and where they're going, right, and actually get the communication from the game. Then finally, in PNP3, you're going to be creating a team project. So you're going to be taking your individual areas that you've created up until this point and now connecting them as a team. So say, for example, I'm making an underground bunker and Miguel's making a abandoned factory. Now as a team, we need to design a scenario to how do I get from the underground bunker to that abandoned warehouse, and then how do we make that feel like a natural blend and actually have some cohesiveness to it. So we work on the transitions between the areas, as well as this is where you now get to add in that level of polish. So you add in your assets, add in materials, and we provide you guys with a nice asset library to start to build from and replace your assets with. And this is where it'll start to feel like a final piece. So if anybody's ever played sandbox games, right, if you're a fan of open world type games or big, massive environments, a lot of times those aren't just one big scene. Those are multiple different scenes that are loaded dynamically and loaded at certain times, and you guys will be using a similar system. So you'll have 5 to 6 teammates, each person has a scene, and then they're loaded connected to each other, loaded additively from one another. So I just wanted to go through the overall project so you get an overview of what it is you're doing, rather than just kind of doing the assignments each week and not really seeing the purpose. That is the end result, is you're making a 3D level that's fully polished, that's connected with other students and in a team setting. So we're going to start with designing that on paper, then implement our ideas, and then polish it further. All right, so giving you a breakdown of now the course, And you'll see these two terms in FSO. You're going to see design tasks and you're going to see technical tasks. So basically they're broken down to where they have prerequisites. So you'll have to complete the first design task to move on to the next one. What's nice about this is that you can work at your own pace. If you need to say, you're going out of town for the second week and you need to work on your LDD and start your bubble diagram earlier, you're able to just work on that as soon as you finish that first assignment. So it really allows you to work at your own pace and then kind of need as you go, submit your assignments and then get the feedback for moving forward. So let's take a look at what's going on in these actual design tasks. So the first one you guys will want to tackle as soon as you get the chance to is just reading through the documentation. So reading through the game design document, reading through the Scraps Creative Vision, so you know what the game is all about. So if I'm asking you guys to design a level, well, it helps if you know what game we're making, right? Are we making a game like Super Meat Boy? Are we making a game like Dark Souls? Are we making a game like Celeste? Like, what is the actual game that we're making, right? So now you can start to understand what type of level it is that's being expected of you. So that's the first thing. We've also provided you guys with what we call the Scraps Training Grounds, which is just a small area for you to get a feel for the character and the controls, and kind of visualize what a level could potentially be, to really get you prepared for then starting to design your own levels. So once you understand the constraints, you're going to want to come up with a bunch of ideas. Just put a bunch of ideas down on paper, see what you can come up with, and then organize those ideas in a short two-page document explaining the overall plan for your level. Then from there, we're going to create a bubble diagram. So for the bubble diagram, this has some similarities to what you did in Game Design 1 way back when you were doing some flow charting. The purpose of the bubble diagram is to focus on the flow of the level and focus on how each interaction is going to be connected to the next one without worrying about what the level visually looks like. So your bubble diagram, which is in essence a flow chart in a lot of ways, is the template to then building your final map. So you use the bubble diagram to start to plan out your space, and then you from there will replace those bubbles with actual plans for what the architecture is going to look like in your level. So week 1, you'll be reading through the documentation and doing your level design document. Week 2 is the bubble diagram, and then you guys have week 3 and 4 to work on the final map. All right. So at the same time are the technical tasks. So I encourage you guys to work on at least one technical task and one design task per week. If you can get ahead, right, if you can knock out a few of them early, it's just going to make the course more enjoyable rather than starting to feel overwhelmed towards the end. So first up for the technical task is just getting your project set up. So going through and getting your tools ready to go, so downloading the correct version of Perforce, correct version of Unity, and then we provide you with a Unity project that has the game files and has the character and everything you need to start completing these assignments. So that's the first thing. We are going to be using ProBuilder this month, going to get you guys warmed up to creating objects and creating geometry right inside of Unity. And the first task for that is going to be the control station. So this is just an exercise to get you practicing analyzing reference images and building an object out of ProBuilder. So you're going to put this object together or put something similar together and then apply some materials to it. Then from there we're going to make a wind turbine, and this is going to start to go over the concepts of animation inside of Unity. So we're going to build this object out of ProBuilder, then get it to animate, and then from there we're going to tie it back to the control station, so the player needs to walk up to the control station and interact, and that causes the animation to play. So not only is it animated, but now it's controlled by the character through a script and through a trigger volume. Then finally, that's leading up to the entryway. So the entryway is the big technical task in the course, and that's basically showing the concepts that you've learned from the control station and the wind turbine. So pretty much making a door out of ProBuilder and then interacting, and the door opens, and you interact again and the door closes. And we're going to add in feedback like sound effects, and lights can change color, different things like that to communicate what's happening to the player. And then lastly is the simple setup. So it's a small series of interactions that you can create and some helpful tips for actually building your level. This also is going to get us introduced to things like our inventory system. So in essence, we could make a locked door to where there's some condition that needs to be met before the door will actually open. So once you've been able to do this, once you've been able to successfully create the entryway and then understand the concepts in the simple setup, you will have everything you need to know to create a level in level design. So getting you prepared, and you can prove that you are ready to actually build your level by completing the technical tasks. All right, so I'm just going to review this concept really quickly. I'm sure you guys have already seen a slide similar to this before in an earlier class, but mechanics versus gameplay, right? So a game mechanic is just a construct of rules that exist within the game, right? And they're set to be a certain way. So I like to use Mario as an example. So we're going to use Mario's jumping as a mechanic, right? So Mario can jump. He can jump a certain number of units. There's certain rules to how jump works. All right? So what is gameplay? So gameplay is the specific way we interact using using that mechanic. So if we're talking about jump, gameplay would be all the different things that Mario does with the jump mechanic. So Burchars and Kyler, can you guys give me any examples in chat of something that Mario does with jump? All right, so Kyler says Mario jumps to destroys a brick. Good. Burchard says long jump to get over falls. Yeah, so like you jump to get over a pit. Yep, good. So yeah, here I've got Mario jumping to squish a Goomba. Here is Mario jumping to get over a gap. And then there is Mario jumping to break a brick and to get a coin, right? So those are all instances where Mario is just jumping, right? The player is sitting at the controller and pressing A. Every time they're doing the same action, but there's a different result, right? We're starting to get variety out of this mechanic, and we can start to create more gameplay if we can start to use it in more and more creative ways. So these small instances of gameplay we like to call setups, right? So a setup is just some instance of gameplay using a given mechanic. And you can see as I put those images up, and you can see as they're connected, this almost starts to look like a level, right? We can basically have one setup and then connect it to another and connect it to another, and that is how level design happens. That is how you can start to create this experience by just chaining these interactions together. All right, so now we're going to break down the setup into 3 elements that are going to be required for you when you start to think about your own mechanics. So the first one is a core action. So that is going to be the mechanic that's used during that specific gameplay scenario. The next piece of the gameplay setup is going to be the interactive object. So for scraps, we're creating level-specific mechanics. So what that means is you're not going to add new things to the character. So I can't add double jump to the character. I can't add a jetpack or a grappling hook, right? I can't add new pieces. There's going to be something in the level that the player interacts with. And then finally, there's a success event, right? So this is basically the result of doing it correctly, right? It's basically a cause and effect. The player does something in the environment, and there's a result because of that interaction. So let's take a look at a few examples. There's Mario again, and we're breaking it down. So jumping is the core action. The object you're interacting with is the question mark block, and the success event is the block changes and you get the coin out of it. All right, looking at Sonic, here we got Sonic jumping, right, and jumping on the little spring pad. And when you do so, it launches Sonic to a higher point, right? So something like this is definitely a great example of what you'd want to do in scraps. So rather than giving the player double jump, we can create little springboards or little launch pads that allow them to jump to higher locations. And now it's about where those are placed in the level. It starts to become much more about the level design. Last example here is Doom, or just any shooter in general. So shooting at some type of explosive object. Here we've got a barrel, and then the success event is it blows up, right? So that is the core breakdown of a gameplay setup that you want to start to think about. There's going to be some core action, some object that you interact with, and then some result of that action. And we're going to go through what the core actions of Scraps are, as well as some of the interactive objects we provide, as well as options you have for yourself. All right, so before we get into that further, just want to do a little overview of what Scraps is all about, what this game actually is. So Scraps is a third-person action exploration game. So the premise of it is there was some post-apocalyptic event that hit, and it caused society to break off into two factions. You have the Scrappers and you have the Basts. So the Basts live high up in a bastion. Basically, the wealthiest individuals were able to pool their resources together and start to develop a normal lifestyle again after this post-apocalyptic event. The Scrappers are still living out in the wastelands, and they're sent on missions from the bastions to complete. So they have tasks to complete, and the Scrappers are hoping one day they can get their way into the bastion. So they're sent on some type of mission, right? And what that mission is up to you to figure out. So that could be something like collecting a specific item, or it could also be achieving some task. So it could be go collect 5 batteries and bring them back. It could be go collect the valuable necklace, or go find the medical samples. Or it could be some event like go restore power to the warehouse, or go reconstruct the radio tower so we can communicate with the radio station. Some event like that. Go and blow up the dam to release the water into the river. Something along the lines like that. Some major event or mission for the player to complete. So hopefully you guys know who these are, MacGyver and Rambo. So I like to use this analogy a lot because I want you guys to think more like MacGyver and a lot less like Rambo. And what I mean by that is we don't really want to focus on combat. So you're not going to have weapons the player picks up and they can shoot constantly at enemies and things like that. MacGyver instead uses the environment and uses creative solutions to complex problems. So see what you can come up with. Almost think of this like a puzzle game, or like you're setting up these interactions and ways to interact within the environment. And then there's solutions to these problems. All right, so when creating a game, there's often design pillars that go into the fundamentals of the actual design. Like, what is the core thing we want to focus on? And this is the same concept whether you're making a game like Candy Crush or World of Warcraft or anything in between, right? You have these core design pillars, these design principles that you're trying to stick to as a design team. So what they are in Scraps, this ties directly back into that MacGyver mindset, is manipulation and scavenging. So basically we're manipulating and modifying objects in the environment to have some result, right? As well as scavenging, so collecting valuable items or collecting some of those pieces to then manipulate or put into the environment in certain places or at certain times. Also, another major design pillar is that you're unaccompanied while you're playing through Scraps. So you don't have any companions, there's no other AI or NPCs. You're out there in the wastelands by yourself, accomplishing these tasks that were sent to you by the Basts. All right, so see what you can come up with these. Try to stick to these. Remember that manipulation and scavenging are your main priorities. Those are the main things you want to think about, and see what you can do to build off of that, those main principles. All right, a few things just I want to mention to stay away from. You can find these in the creative vision as well, but definitely they're important to keep in mind while you're starting to develop your level. First up is any type of repetitive layout. So we want to stay away from things that have a repeated layout, things like prisons, hotels, schools, anything where it's the same room, just copy and paste it over and over and over again. That doesn't really make for interesting level design. We want to have spaces that have unique areas that can be a little bit more elaborate rather than just the same area over and over and over again. Also, fantasy and sci-fi. So Scraps is set in the not too distant future, so there is some sci-fi technology that the player has access to. Obviously, they have a grapnel that they can kind of move and manipulate objects with. So that is something that if you have an idea that's kind of like within the realm of that, if it's something similar, let me know or reach out to one of us and we'll be able to just make sure you're going in the right direction. So like what we want to stay away from is like, a level set in space or like, aliens or different things like that that are, way out into the science fiction realm. But what we can do is like things like a grab null technology in other instances. So say, for example, there's platforms and there's little jet propulsions that are like making the platform seem like they're hovering. Things like that we're okay with, as long as it's kind of in the same realm of what the grab null already is in that technology. But stay away from like fantasy in terms of like magic and monsters and things like that. We want scraps to be grounded in reality. So if it's something, if you're making a mechanic or something, try to think of how would it work in present day right now, and see if you can adapt it from there to fit within the scraps universe. All right, I mentioned this earlier, but no other NPCs or interactive people. You can make hints that they're there if you like talk to someone behind a closed door or get a voiceover from the Bastion. But stay away from actually having enemies or AI in the level. It just eats up too much time for the amount of time we have for our project. And then another one is editing the player controller or making any adjustments to the character or new controllers. So things like drivable vehicles, or like here being able to walk up to the cannon and move it around using WASD and then pressing a button to fire it, right? What we want to do instead is use the controls that were given to us. So we say we had a pressure plate, and when you put an object on the pressure plate with the grav null, it causes the cannon to raise or lower. And then next to that, there's a lever, and you can walk up to the lever and press E, and that causes the cannon to fire. So there's a lot of the things that you might come up with that you think you can't necessarily do, but there are ways to adapt it and shape it to get the same end result, just a different process to get to that point. All right, just a few more of these. One is just teleportation, so like jumping the player around the level or teleporting them from spot to spot. I see sometimes you walk up to a door and press E, and then you teleport to the other side. Instead, the door should open, right? You want to build your level where everything is physically connected to one another, not teleporting the player between floors and things like that. Everything should be seamlessly connected. Plot deviation, so things like the Terminator, like the Terminator with robots running around everywhere, or the Matrix. Try to stick to the main plot in scraps, which you can find in the Creative Vision. And then please stay away from any political and religious references, at least real world. You can do things like made up doomsday cults and things like that, but stay away from actual real world references. All right, so now I want to get into the core actions that are provided to you guys. So remember we talked about the 3 parts of a gameplay the gameplay breakdown: the core action, the interactive object, and then the success event. All right, so the grab null. This is one of the core actions that you can use for your mechanics. So this allows the player to pick up objects, carry them around with them. You can drop them if you let go. You can right-click the mouse to throw them. You can also set up interactions to attach things in place. So say you want to pick up a battery and attach it into a little outlet or a socket, it can attach and then power something on. And then vice versa, you could have something in place, like say you have pipes on the wall, and use the grab null to rip them off, and it causes liquid to start spewing out. So you can rip things out, you can attach them in place, you can throw them and carry them with you. That's one core action you can use. The other is movement. All right, so the movement our player can do is he can jump, he can crouch, and then he can collide with certain objects. So he doesn't have like a swim animation, he doesn't have a double jump, he doesn't have a climb, but jumping onto things, like jumping onto springboards, jumping onto falling platforms, can be one of the core actions. And then finally, the interaction key. So walking up to something and pressing E. So this is the core interaction key of Scraps, and can be basically, you can do a lot with this one. So you walk up to something and press E, and animations play, or something happens as a result of that interaction. This is also how our inventory system is used. So you can press E to collect items, and then you can go to other places and press E to use them. So say I go and collect logs throughout the level, and I press E and then use them at a furnace, and that causes the furnace to burn. So that the interaction key is the main way to use items out of the inventory system. All right, so before I talk about specifics of the level design document, it looks like we're good. We're right at 11:30, so go about halfway through. I just want to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions about what you've seen so far, and just kind of recap anything if you want me to cover it again, or if you have any questions about anything specific. Alrighty, well, if not, I'm going to keep going. Feel free to post any questions you guys have in the chat at any point, and I'll get to them. I just wanted to take a break for a second and just show you this calendar that I have up here. You're not going to find this anywhere like in the class. This is just my plan as I was building out the course. So if you're watching this video in the archive or you're here live with me, feel free to take a screenshot of this right now if you want to. This is just a good plan you can have in place to make sure that you're keeping up to date with the assignments and you're not falling behind. So when you see things like LDD research and bubble diagram research, that's just the preparation for the assignment itself. So in the assignment, there's some materials I want you guys to review. So this would be like the research, right? Read through the Scraps game design document. This playlist covers a video series about the assignment itself, and then like the level guidelines. So these are the types of things when it says research. So just plan everything out and then go from there. And you'll also notice that I don't have anything blocked out on the weekends. I tried to leave the weekends open. So say you work during the week or you're busy, you can't do everything as it's laid out like this. You have Saturday and Sunday to catch up from everything from that week before you move on to the next. So hopefully this helps you out. It kind of helped me out plan out the course and what I want the focus to be throughout the week. And some of these aren't super intense. Even though you see something every day, they're not like a full 20-hour assignment. It's just an activity that you should be focused on at that point or starting to think about during that week. So Kyler had a question. I was a little confused on the course policy. Are we supposed to wait till we finish the assignment? The assignment being the course policies? I mean, once you've read through the course policies and you understand them, then you can click completed. I think the question you're asking is for the other assignments, pretty much because how the late policy works is you can submit an assignment after the due date and still get credit. So you can submit up until the end of a module. But once you click, I've completed this activity, that's when we as instructors know to go and grade the assignment. So if you get done with your project setup today, then you can click, I've completed it, and then I'll go in, today or tomorrow, as soon as I see it's available, I'll go in and grade it. So then you can start moving on to the next assignments. Does that answer your question? Okay, cool. All right, so I'm jumping back over to the slides. All right, so just to talk a little bit about the level design document and the important facets of your actual level that you'll be making. So some overviews and things to think about while you're building the level. These I'm going to reiterate again later as we start to actually build the map and they become a little bit more important, but it's still helpful information to know ahead of time so you know what type of level it is you're making. So you guys will be focused on making a linear experience for the players that are going to be playing through your level. So they should experience 90 to 100% of the content in your level. So what this means is you want to stay away from building like an open world type level with multiple endings or a lot of optional things to do. Remember, you're just a student right now, and your goal here is to build a portfolio to then get you a job. So we want to build a level that can showcase what you can do in a short, concise manner, right? You're going to record videos when you get to PNP3, and it'll showcase what your level's all about. If you have a lot of open space, that's not going to be as compelling to watch. We want to keep a linear experience and a lot of action in a space. So also in terms of time, on average, the level should be about 2 to 4 minutes for players to complete. All right, so think about that. Think about trying to plan out your level for that amount of time. And if you're like, man, 4 minutes, that doesn't feel like very much time, I recommend if you have access to a game like Portal, or even if you just go to YouTube and watch a gameplay footage of like a game like Portal for about 4 minutes, you'll see that there's a lot of content that can be covered in there. 4 minutes is a good amount of gameplay to cover, right? So what really the point I'm trying to make is you're not making a level that's 20 minutes, or you're not making a level that's a half an hour. Hopefully that eases some of your minds and it doesn't freak you out like, oh my God, I'm going to make this massive level. You're going to make 2 mechanics and the goal for the player to complete, right? And then always keep in mind that creative vision. It should always read like a scraps level, and you can always refer back to that at any point to double check that nothing you're doing is conflicting with that document. All right, so one of the first main points, or the main parts of the level design document is the player's goal, right? This is the main objective that the player has to complete. This gives your level a sense of purpose, right? If I make these awesome mechanics, like I make exploding barrels that blow things up, and I make, say, pressure plates that move these hydraulic lifts up and down, I have all this cool gameplay, but I don't really have a objective for the player to complete, it starts to feel very much just a bunch of gameplay interactions without any purpose, right? So we want to give the player an objective to accomplish and some type of challenge to complete, right? So think of the player's goal as like your elevator pitch, the exciting thing, the fun thing that's going to get people motivated to play your level. So when you're filling out this section of the level design document, answer the following questions. So 1, what does the player have to do? What is the thing I actually need to complete? So the player needs to power on the generator refuel the generator to power on the major warehouse facility so the Bastion can start manufacturing some food products for everybody, right? So how do they actually do it? So I said I need to refuel the generator, but how do I do that? So the player needs to go find some gas cans and then bring them over to gas pumps to refill them and bring them over to the generator, and then maybe there's some missing fuses. So the player needs to scavenge and find some fuses, attach them into the generator. So I'm starting to actually explain how am I going to accomplish that goal. Also, who are they doing it for, right? Give that Bastion some type of personality. Maybe that can help you get into this and really get you motivated about working on this project. So, maybe the Bastion is goofy or weird. Maybe they're a little evil or vindictive, and they're actually out to get you, right? And you can start to plan that stuff out and then think about how you want to actually implement that. In PNP3, you get the ability to record voiceovers. So you can give voiceovers for either the player or for the Bastion and actually communicate with them in the game. And it really leaves for a really immersive experience when you do things like that. So where do they have to go? This will get answered when you pick a theme for the level, but where exactly in the world do they have to go to actually accomplish this goal? And one of the most important ones is, why do they actually care? What's the motivation? What's the purpose of this objective? So if you just say to me, my goal of the level is to collect the medicine, and that's all you tell me, well, I don't really know as a player why, like, what is important about this medicine? Am I just going to get some cough drops because someone is a little sick? Or maybe, there was a candy factory that's tried out a new candy and it caused this disease to break out, and they found out that there was a cure for it, but it's only a very small amount in a locked away bunker. So you need to go and find that to, start to save humanity. So you can start to see the difference between like cough drops and something that's a little more serious. So start to build up that. Why does the player care to accomplish this goal? Is there some major reward or some motivation to complete that goal? Right? This would be the thing that keeps players playing rather than just like setting down the controller and going to something else. Think about how the player is going to feel about that interaction, and can you do anything to motivate them further, give them more detail. All right, so the theme of your level, we know that Scraps is set in a post-apocalyptic setting. We've provided you guys with a list of pre-approved themes, and there are a bunch to pick from. So here's just a few, like an office building, a military base, a foundry, a train yard, a city block, and then there's a bunch more in the actual themes document, which I have linked to the level design document template. So a lot of these are very generic and they can be modified. So as an example, someone asked me if they can do a bank. And I was like, yep, you can, because a bank is essentially an office building. So there's a lot of times where the type you want to do is just already basically a subtype of one of the themes already chosen. Last month there was a student that wanted to make a level on a wrecked submarine or a wrecked ship. So he did a shipyard. That's one of like a shipping yard. And then he basically just had the ship off at one part in the level that you actually go into. So he was able to get that theme that he was wanting based off of the list we provide. And also, if you don't see one on there, just reach out to us and ask. Oftentimes, either we can add it if we feel like it fits appropriately, or we can kind of point you to one that's already there and very similar. The one piece of advice I can give you guys is don't pick multiple themes. Like, don't say, oh, I want to build a military base, and then I go into an underground bunker, and then the underground bunker comes out in a city block. I recommend picking one theme and sticking to it as best as you can. So really pick one theme and then expand upon that and have multiple areas within that specific environment. All right, so next up is the featured asset, right? So when you think about your featured asset, I want you to think about it like a problem in the level for the player to solve. All right, there's some obstacle in the way, there's some challenge for them to complete in order to accomplish their goal. So if we just have a goal that's very easy to complete, that doesn't make the player feel very accomplished. So say, for example, it's to going back to the generator, right, to repair the generator. If I just have the pieces of the generator laying right in front of the player, it doesn't feel very difficult to do. But if there's other problems to solve first to get those pieces, now it starts to feel more of an accomplishment. So I'm going to go through a few criteria of what your featured asset should be, and there's really a lot of lot of ways to go about doing the featured asset or the featured interaction in your level. So as I go through these pictures, one thing you'll see is you want an object that really stands out to the player. So as soon as this image comes up, you see this big piece of machinery here. There's another one, this big turbine. You want something that's going to stand out to the player that looks interactive and also interesting to look at. So this one I really like, this like mechanical arm here. You can see as soon as the image comes in, you're kind of drawn to that. It looks like something that's important or something that's really interesting. Here's another example. Here's just a fire truck, but it catches your eye and something that stands out to the player. You also want your featured asset to be something that's unique in the level. So I wouldn't want it to be a fire truck and then have a parking lot full of fire trucks all over the place. You want it to be one unique object that the player interacts with. All right, so the first criteria you want to think about is something that's visually striking, something that catches the player's attention. Also, you want to have something that's tied to player progression. Remember, going back to we want the player to experience 90 to 100% of the level. We want the featured asset to be something that they're required to interact with in some way, shape, or form. And then also we want the featured asset to be something that's interactive. So something that you actually need to manipulate or something you need to use one of the core actions on to get some result. So say this tank over here, I need to go find missile rounds. I pick up a missile round with the grab-null. I carry it over to the barrel of the tank and it slides in. And then I can press E and fire the tank and it blows a hole in the wall, or it blows up a giant tanker truck and then allows me to progress through the debris, right? So some type of interaction that you need to perform, and then some way to actually progress through that, right? There's really a lot of different ways to do this. You can make the featured asset part of the actual player goal. You could make it something that allows you and helps you complete your goal. Like I've seen recently, someone designed a level that had a water truck. So basically, you'd go to the truck and then interact, and then basically get water from it to put out fires or use the water for different things in the level. And then the truck would kind of move from checkpoint to checkpoint, almost like a payload, kind of like moves on a track. It would move to certain points in the level, and you'd use it along the way. So those are really interesting use that I saw, and things like that are definitely an option. Last thing is you want it to be a memorable experience. So if you've ever played a game, or maybe you fought a boss or did something really cool in the level, and you're like, man, that was awesome. I want to go tell a buddy about that, or I want to tell someone else about this because I want them to experience that. That's the type of feeling you want to get from your featured asset. Something that can show off what you can do, as well as leaves the player with a really interesting and cool memory, something memorable from your level. So maybe this construction equipment, maybe there's a big wrecking ball attached to it, and the player can go into the little cockpit here and then pull a lever, and it swings and breaks open a wall, and debris flies everywhere, and there's a sound effect, and then the player can walk through, right? Some part of the level that's going to leave them with an interesting experience. I've included this microscope down here because not all of them need to be a massively sized object for it to be visually striking. You can have something like this and it's positioned with lights on it and just draws the player to it naturally, and then there's some type of interaction to complete with it. All right, so try to be creative with this stuff. Try and come up with a list of a bunch of different featured assets. And also think about something that's tied to your specific theme. So, if you're doing like a construction yard or a junkyard, some type of construction equipment would fit naturally in that environment, right? If you're doing a military base, something like a tank or some type of vehicle, military vehicle, could fit well in that environment as well. So think about your theme and think about what type of objects would actually exist there and how you can use them in creative ways. All right, so here's an example of a featured asset, and now this one is basically the featured asset is also the goal. But you can see, as I described this, that it meets all of those criteria: memorable, visually striking, tied to progression, and interactive. So the Bastion sends you to go find this valuable vehicle and bring it back to them. But of course, the cliche of when you find the vehicle, the tire is flat and the battery is completely dead. So now we need to go and venture off and find replacement pieces. So these are the type of descriptions I want you guys to start thinking about when you're filling out your LDD. Is even if you don't know exactly how to do this in Unity just yet or in a game engine, start to just speak out. Just don't worry about writing script. Just explain with English how you want it to function, right? So the player has to find a replacement tire and battery, pick them up with the grabnol, and then carry them over to the vehicle, right? So once they're there, they will snap the tire in place or attach the battery to the car. Even if you don't know how to do that just yet, at least start to plan it out logically, and then we can tackle how we're going to do that inside of Unity, right? So maybe walk up to the hood, I press E and the hood pops open, I put in the new battery, I replace the tire from another vehicle. Once those are accomplished, I can now walk up to the door of the vehicle and press E to get inside. And now you might be saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, he says that I'm not able to do drivable vehicles. I can't do new controllers. And you're right, we can't. But what we can do is we can do cutscenes to fake interactions like that. So rather than the player controlling it, we have a predetermined cutscene that's always going to play the same every single time. So you could get into any type of vehicle or any type of movement to basically give a cutscene. So I get in the car, I start driving the vehicle, I smash out of the side of the building, and then from there, right as I'm about to crash land, a helicopter is going to pick me up and then drop me off at my teammate's area. Right? So I drive the car out of the building, and now that is the transition to the ending. So that is how I'm trying to make it a memorable experience, almost like bursting out Need for Speed style. out of the building itself. You're interactive because you have to find replacement pieces. It's tied to progression because that's how you win the level, is by driving out of the building, as well as visually striking, right? Just this fancy sports car and positioned in a way that looks interactive to the player. So try to give that detail. Notice there I didn't say my featured asset's a sports car. I tried to explain the whole interaction and the pieces that you would need to actually build this setup inside of Unity. All right, so now we're going to spend the last, see how we're doing on time. We got about 10 minutes. I might go a little bit over, probably about to 12:05 or 12:10, something like that. But now we're just going to talk a little bit about the mechanics, and then we're going to wrap up from there. So remember, your mechanics have to have the three parts. It has to have a core action, it has to have an interactive object, and then there has to be a success event. All right? So these are three interactive objects that we provide to you guys. So we have the mechanical lever, where you can walk up to and press E, and you pull the lever and press E and you pull it the opposite way. We have the switch panel, which works like a button in essence, where you walk on the switch or you touch the switch with something, and now it's on, and then you can walk away from it and it's still on until you touch it again and it turns off. And then also we have the pressure plate. So the pressure plate works similarly to the switch panel, except something needs to be standing on it. So if you put something on the pressure plate, as soon as you take it off, it's going to deactivate itself. So each one of these comes with, basically each one of these pieces has this component in the inspector. So we're going to be using Unity events. If you guys aren't already familiar, you'll definitely familiarize yourself with them by the end of this project. But you can see here, each one of them has like an activate and deactivate. So this is where you guys get to design the success event. So when I pull the lever, something happens. You know, a door opens, or a force field changes color, or changes properties, or you know, something in the level happens. Whatever that success event you want to happen is up to you to design. So you don't have to use these interactive objects. You don't have to use the mechanical lever, the pressure plate, or the switch panel, but they are available to you. So there's nothing wrong with using them. If you want to design your own or design something different, that's also acceptable. So you want to have exploding barrels that blow up certain objects, or you want to have Molotovs that burn wooden objects. Things like that are definitely acceptable. You just want to stay away from changing the player character, right? Remember, our interactive object should be something in the level that the player interacts with. All right, so just, yeah, some things we want to stay away from. I've probably mentioned these a few times as I was lecturing. First is like double jump, right? Like a jetpack, grappling hook, you know, like skill tree upgrades or changes to the character. We want to keep the player exactly as they are. So any permanent changes to the player we want to stay away from, or any changes to the core actions. So don't change how jump works, don't change how the movement works, things like that. You want to think about those level-specific objects that you're going to interact with the core actions we provided. Right? If you got hired to work on the next Uncharted game, you wouldn't want to just be like, okay, in my level, Nathan Drake, he gets a jetpack because I want to give him a jetpack. All right, they would not be happy with that. So you want to basically stick to the game you've been given and create fun and interesting interactions using those core actions and using the game systems. All right, so next up is this concept of IPM, all right, to introduce, practice, and master these mechanics. So anytime you're playing games, when you're being introduced to a new mechanic, it happens in a very safe environment. So you get the opportunity to learn how the mechanic works without getting punished super badly if you make a mistake. So going back to Mario's jumping, this is where Mario first learns to jump, right? So pretty much this Goomba coming at you is your timer to learn the jump mechanic right when the game starts. So once you jump, either jump over the Goomba or squish the Goomba, now you're in this space where you can break these bricks and hit the question mark blocks. And you'll also notice the pipe right on the edge of the image there. So that's just kind of signifying there's no other enemies or no other threats coming at you, and you have this small environment to learn that jump mechanic. Then getting into practice setups, right? Or basically starting to give a little bit more challenge, a little bit more difficulty to those interactions. So practicing can start to prove that the player efficiently knows how to use the mechanic. And then this is where other mechanics can start to become incorporated. So other hazards, other things that can hurt the player, other things that make it a bit more challenging. So here's just a small, subtle detail about jumping in Mario is you have the short pipe and the long pipe. So here you can tap A to do a short jump, and you can hold down A to do a longer jump. So as a designer, once you know that the player can get through both of these scenarios, you can now force the player to do short jumps at certain times and force them to do long jumps at specific times, right? You start to now understand what the player knows and can use that in future setups. All right, and then lastly, mastery, right? This is where you're really giving the player a final challenge, right? Testing the skills of the player. And this oftentimes is where you start to incorporate other mechanics and other threats to the player, right? To really make it a problem. So here in these images, again, jumping is the mechanic is the action we're focused on. But here in Bowser's Castle, look at all the different threats, right? So here we got this little fireball that's getting shot up out of the lava, and then down below we've got that lava here to where if you fall in it, you're instantly dead, right? So if you miss your jump, immediately more punished because you're killed and go back to either a checkpoint or the beginning. And then also we have this fireball, stick of death, that always kills me every single time, that's spinning around, that you need to avoid as well. You can see here they're almost baiting you with this collectible or this item in here. If you really feel like you're good enough to keep avoiding the objects or avoiding the hazards, you can grab that and keep going forward, right? But you can see a lot more complex than, say, like the first area in Mario where it's just a few blocks to break, right? Up until this point, we've been practicing jumping, and now we're starting to really challenge the player. Down below, I really liked this image and wanted to, or this GIF, I really wanted to include showing how sometimes players can push the boundaries of mechanics even further than maybe the designers intended. Right, so here you can see he's able to just barely clip the collision of these turtles and get across the gap pretty pixel perfect, right? It's really impressive to see that. But even a gap this size, right? You would never see a gap this big in the first level of Mario, right? I'm sure the designers had some intentions of, they want players to start up here and then jump across. They probably knew this was possible. But again, you wouldn't see a gap this massive in the earlier levels. This comes way later on once the players already had experience with those mechanics. So what you'll be doing is you will have, let me go over to the level design document quick. You will have two mechanics that you're designing, and then each one of those mechanics will have 3 gameplay interactions. So I recommend checking out this level layout guide that's included in the level design document. This has a lot of really helpful information. You can see we're breaking down choosing your theme. Here I talk about the player's goal. Going forward, talking about the featured asset. Then we get into the level mechanics. So we go through what a level mechanic is, what is a setup. But then as we go down, we talk about progression, IPM or IPTM. So the difference between these is up to you to decide. You can use IPM, which is going to introduce, practice, and master each mechanic separately. So say my mechanics are exploding barrels that blow up destructible objects, and then pressure plates that move hydraulic lifts up and down. So I can have introduce exploding barrels, introduce pressure plates, practice exploding barrels, practice pressure plates, and then mastery and mastery, right? And I have 6 gameplay interactions, and they're completely separate from one another. But if you'd like to try to come up with a twist or a combination of those, you can do so with following this structure. So the first 4 interactions are the same. Introduce pressure plates, introduce exploding barrels, practice pressure plates, practice exploding barrels. But then the twist is basically the first time the player sees the 2 together. So maybe there's a scenario where you need to throw an exploding barrel at the ceiling and that once that blows up part of the ceiling, it drops down an object which you need to now weigh down the pressure plate. So you can see you had to use both mechanics to solve a single setup, right? So the first mastery is when you're using the two mechanics together for the first time. And then the sixth and final setup is the final challenge using the two mechanics together. So I encourage you guys to at least take this into consideration, as well as pick two mechanics that use different core actions. If you're using jumping all the time, it's going to start to feel repetitive. So try to use one mechanic that uses the grab null, and then one mechanic that uses the interaction, or some combination, and then that will definitely lead you into an easier time if you choose to do the IPTM structure. All right, but you'll pick one of those, and you're going to create 3 gameplay setups for the mechanics that you choose. So plan out how you want to introduce your mechanic, plan out how you want to master it, and then plan out the final, the introduce, the practice, and then the final mastery. All right, so just one more slide I want to go through, which is what I like to call the wrap-up. So when you're coming up with your level, right, you're picking a theme, you're coming up with a player goal, really make sure it all makes sense, right? So definitely try to pick a theme that makes sense to why those mechanics would exist in that space, right? So if you want to have like conveyor belts and they move back and forth and change directions when the player pulls a lever, you wouldn't want to put like conveyor belts in like a military base, for example, right? You'd want to pick an environment where conveyor belts would naturally make sense, like some type of warehouse, maybe some type of like lumber yard where they're kind of turning trees into planks, things like that. Try to think of areas and environments that your featured asset and that your mechanics would naturally fit in, or come up with a theme and think of what would fit naturally in that space. So just as a pitch of a level, this is something I came up with, and a similar structure you want to think about when you're finalizing your level. So here's just an idea that the player has to break into a bank to receive this valuable set of emeralds, right? But of course, they can't just walk into the bank and the emeralds are on the ground. That would be too boring and too easy to complete, right? So instead, they're locked behind this big vault door, right? And that's the featured asset for the level. So that's the main problem that I need to figure out. I need to figure out how to open up the vault door so then I can accomplish my goal. So how do I open up the vault door? Well, I use my mechanics in some way, shape, or form. So my first mechanic I thought of was like, okay, in a bank, there's definitely some type of security cameras, right? That would be kind of monitoring all the activity in here. So I didn't go to detail on the slide itself. I just say must avoid detection. But that could be, you walk in, you get seen by a camera, and then the door shuts. So you need to go back and reset a button, which will open up the door, and you need to try again to get through that area. So maybe there's spots where I need to actually throw objects at the camera and destroy them to, quote unquote, avoid detection. So what that is, how the mechanic works, I haven't fully described here. You can kind of get the idea, and you can come up with your own possibilities for how that could work. And then also, I thought, well, if there's all these electronic systems and all this security, there's got to be some type of panel or some type of security system. So I had this concept of these types of fuses over here. You can rip them out of the control panels to power things down, or you can attach them in to power things on, right? So by using those two mechanics, so by disarming and avoiding the security cameras, and by powering things on and off throughout the level, you're able to override the security on the vault door, which then allows you to accomplish your goal. So you can start to see how everything's tied together rather than just starting to feel a little disjointed. See if you can start to piece all that together when you have a good plan in place for your own level. All right, so thank you guys for joining me. I'm going to stop the recording now, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to reach out. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to reach out to one of the instructors, either myself or the other instructors in your course, and we can take a look at your progress or give you any feedback on your own document.